let's look at some other things that we can do with methods. Well, we created a method that basically just did an action. It didn't take any input and it didn't put any output. We can do two things with a method. We can give input and we can give output as well. So let's try creating a method that is able to take some input. And in this case, we are also going to use a concept called overloading, which is to have the same method name, but to have a different way of calling it. So we are going to create a special kind of variable here, call it a parameter, and we will call this, or we'll make this a string. We will call this text. And what we are going to do here is we are going to pass to this method a value that is going to be used in this method. So I will take this system.out.println, and now we are actually going to use this. I'm going to use this text value so you can see what's going to happen here if you think about this. We're going to call this method now, and we are going to provide a value here, a variable of the string type, call it text, and then whatever we pass it in here. That is what's going to get printed out. So let's see how we could use this in action. Instead of calling myPrinter.print and not passing anything, let's use the version of this method, the overloaded version, where we take a string. So in this case, I'm going to print hello printer. And now what's going to happen here is that when this print method is called, it is going to take this string that we have passed in. It is going to be set to this variable, call it text, and then this text is going to be passed into this printing method in order to print it out to the screen. So let's run this and see what happens. You can see the words hello printer were printed out. So now we have actually done something useful. We have created a method on our printer that allows us to put in any text we want and then spit that back out. Now let's look at one other thing that we can do with methods. Let's create a method that will return us the mother number. Now this isn't very useful because we know we can just grab the mother number just by calling .mother number and getting that data out. But we can actually try to hide the data, which is a best practice of creating a class. Later on, we are not going to have access to this mother number. We are going to need some kind of method in order to do that. So let's go ahead and create that method. So I'm going to do the same thing here, except instead of using void here, we are going to specify a return type. This is the type of data that this method needs to return, which in this case will be a string. And we are going to call this method getMotherNumber. And in Java, this kind of method is known as a getter. This is a special kind of method that allows you to get some data from the class. We also have another special kind of method in Java called a setter, which allows you to set data on a class. So let's look at how we would implement this method. What we can do here is we can use a keyword called return, and this is going to return whatever comes after this return keyword. In this case, we want to return the mother number. So now you can see that what our method is going to do is when this is called, it is going to just return a string that is the mother number. Now we can actually assign whatever comes back from here to a variable. Let me show you how we can do this now. So I will get rid of this line here and we will create a new variable of type string, call it the mother number, and then we will call myPrinter.getMotherNumber. And now you can see what we are going to do here is we're going to get the result of this method called when we call myPrinter.getMotherNumber. It is going to return us a string. We are going to immediately assign this string to this variable. So now I could actually print this out from inside of our main by doing system.out.println and then printing the mother number. And now let's run this and see what happens here. And as you can see, it is printed the mother number. So just to recap what we have covered here, we basically saw how we can create methods inside of a class, and these methods operate on the data that is inside of the class. We created a method that didn't return anything, but it did something. It actually printed to the screen what the mother number of the class was. We saw how we can create a method that took a parameter, and if we want to specify multiple parameters, we could do that as well. And we can use each one of these parameters. When we call a method, we simply pass in what we want to use as a parameter. So in this case, we had passed in the value of hello printer, and it printed out that value. Then we also saw how we could create a method that could return a value, and we used this return keyword to return a value back. And we returned the data that was part of our class or part of our object.